Dead Island is a game that holds a special place in my heart because, let's be honest, it was a little bit on the naff side with B-movie dialogue, characters that are inexplicably on a Polynesian island, and a frame rate and graphical fidelity that on the Xbox 360 really struggled to deliver, a little bit ahead of its time, you might say. However, now, Techland, the developers of Dead Island, Riptide and Dying Light, which if you don't know the history about, you might want to have a little look into, have remastered this game using Dying Light's better engine, much better lighting, and it's a very nice thing. For all the criticism that we have for Dead Island, one of the things that we did not have any criticism for was its scope or its worlds that it created. Yes, the pacing was a little bit slow, but the great big island resort of Banoi, the hotel, the beach, the waves, the little huts that you have to go around in to try and find energy drinks and people's teddy bears, along with some drunken party person champagne right on the end of a pier, was all absolutely lovely. When you got into the city stage of this, it was just as good, and you can see a lot of the foundations for Dying Light within that city. There's lots of really odd little nooks and crannies, there's lots of interesting design buildings, and of course a lot of places for you to get trapped, so zombies can pile in on you as you're cowering in the back, unable to move anywhere. One of the things that the game had in the city area was a sewer system which you used to traverse between City Hall and the police station, which was, whilst a nice idea on paper, mind-numbingly dull. And it's this kind of dullness that's within the game, which has unfortunately come to the fore a little bit with the remaster. It looks good, and you forgive it for a bit of its jankiness with its controls, with its attacking swings, with the way that you can hit people in the head and decapitate them. You forgive it a little bit of that because you realise it is a 5-year-old game. But what you can't forgive it for is the fact that it's got all this wonderful stuff, this wonderful weapon customization which allows you to do absolutely crazy things with machetes and baseball bats and guns to include electricity, toxicity. And now I sound like a System of a Down record. But the pacing of the game felt long and arduous and annoyingly a bit repetitive. It's one of those things that you realise more and more as you play in this version, and you get respawning enemies, respawning loot, but also levelling enemies, so there isn't anything that actually becomes less of a challenge or more of a challenge. You just get a different class of enemy that is on a par level to you, which while it is nice, also means that everything is exactly the same whatever happens and whatever you do. The balancing doesn't give you that coolness of having a customised weapon, smashing it over somebody's head and them exploding because you're a little bit too overpowered, which would be fun. You also get the problem with the cutscenes, which feel a little bit too hazy, like they've been forced into this engine, which they probably have, and you almost feel as if you're missing a key bit of the cutscene before you actually see it. And I can't remember if this was a problem with the original game or if it's a problem that's come from the remaster, but it's certainly highlighted it more now because I'm looking for it, which is a little bit unfair, so I won't discredit it on that. Bad dialogue aside, we can't criticise a 5-year-old game for things that it did 5 years ago. So looking at this as a remaster, it's an incredible job to bring a game that was good with promise but lacking on delivery and giving it something much more substantial in what it does. And if you never played the game, or if you've played Dying Light and you're interested to see the precursor to it, then Dead Island Definitive Edition is a must buy, simply because it's one of those games that helps inform how this genre has changed over the past 5 years. You have lots of zombie games like Left 4 Dead, we're going to get Days Gone soon, we're going to get many other zombie games and survival games. But this is the game that really gels both the first person exploration and open world with the weapon customization and the idea that you can just bludgeon semi-dead humans, which most video games would love to have as a narrative base. The remaster itself does occasionally get a little bit too ahead of itself, and what I mean by that is that the graphics are great, but occasionally it overcompensates with the motion blur, it occasionally overcompensates with a little bit of chromatic aberration, but again, you only really notice that if you're looking for it. And one of the other things that I did notice, not really because I was looking for it, but because it was there, was a frame rate that jumped a bit, and I don't mean jumping down, I mean occasionally jumping up. So you would get what felt like a smooth ride, which would then, as there is nothing else going on, if you're looking at the floor, if you're looking at the waves coming in on the floor without looking at any other scenery, a little bit too quick. But unless you are really, really, really looking for these things, and these are things that will completely and utterly jar your experience of any game, which makes me question why you're probably going to buy this on a console anyway, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. The only things that let down Dead Island, unfortunately, are the things that they let down 5 years ago. Thankfully, graphically, and with the scope of the world, it's enough to really improve the experience overall so that you can enjoy it a lot more than we could 5 years ago. The only problem with it is because of the repetition, because of the way the games work, it does feel quite long. And with a lot of releases coming up, a lot of backdated releases of long RPGs that we've got, it's really up to you if you want to put 20 to 25 hours into a game like this. If you buy the retail edition, you'll also get Dead Island Riptide, also as a download code. You'll also get the 16-bit arcade-like Dead Island Retro Revenge, which is a free-lane beat-em-up. If you are going to experience Dead Island, definitely get your hands on Dead Island Definitive Edition, whether you buy it in a retail copy with all 3 games, Riptide and the Retro Revenge, or if you just buy it on its own as a download. It's a great experience, especially seeming for once in video gaming, we're a little bit zombie light. And I never thought I would say that. Whilst it still has things that make it feel like a 5-year-old game, which 5 years ago made it feel like a game that was a little bit older, it can be forgiven for its conceptual ideas on an open world zombie game, and also an excellent remaster of the graphics, all of the lighting and shadows and textures and everything to boot with it. Well worth the money that you'll be putting in to get the game. For more articles and videos like this, please visit insertdisc.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at InsertDiscUK.